ਭਾਗਦੀਆਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਹੈਪੀ ਤੋਲੋ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਬਰ ਦੀ। ਉਬਰ ਦਾ ਮਾਮਲਾ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਸਿਰਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦਕਿ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੋਰ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਭਖਦਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ। ਪਿਛਲੇ ਵੀਕ ਹੀ ਐਡਮਿੰਟਨ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ 'ਚ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਨਵਾਂ ਬਾਈਲਾਅ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਸਿਟੀ ਬਣਿਆ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਉਬਰ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਹੁਣ 1 ਮਾਰਚ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਲ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ। ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਐਡਮਿੰਟਨ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਕਾਉਂਸਲਰ ਬੈਨ ਹੈਂਡਰਸਨ ਨਾਲ। Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Ben, first I would like to know your views on Uber.
It's been a really difficult discussion for us. It's not easy. It was fairly clear in the city, though, that we tried to use our existing bylaw to control what was happening, and the courts said we couldn't, or the courts were not willing to stand behind the bylaw, so we knew something had to change. Whether or not we've done the right thing or not, I'm not sure, but if we were going to be able to get to control Uber, to get Uber within our bylaw, then we had to create a way of describing them, and that's essentially what our bylaw has done. So we've tried to separate and make it clear that this kind of service that they offer is different from the kind of service that the taxis offer. We've tried to let the taxis also compete in the Uber market if they so choose. And we wanted to make sure that the one thing that we were not prepared to compromise was that the Uber make sure that they were safe, that the drivers had the right licenses, and that they were properly insured. So if that doesn't happen, then Uber can't operate. They're going to have to play by those rules.
Okay. Did you vote for new bylaw or did you vote against new bylaw?
Ended up voting for the bylaw, but there were some things that I wanted to see in there in terms of there were some things I would have preferred to see in the bylaw that didn't get voted on, but in the end I thought better if we hadn't had this new bylaw, we would have had no ability to control anything, and Uber would have continued to operate without any kind of regulation at all, and I didn't think that made sense either. So it's not a perfect world. There was no question there were a lot of members of the Edmonton public that wanted the choice of having an operation like Uber here, and I think in the end we wanted to make sure that the customer was well served and the customer was safe, and we couldn't do that with the old bylaw.
Okay, Edmonton is the first city to make Uber legally, and I think from 31st of March, if Uber drivers have a commercial insurance, they will be operating legally in Edmonton. So did you guys ask Uber to cease their operation till 31st March, or they are still operating?
Well, we can't. We asked them to cease their operation months and months ago, and we actually tried to put an injunction and go to court over it, and the court said they wouldn't enforce it. So we don't have the power to stop them from operating as they currently are. We can charge individual drivers, and we have been doing that. And we would continue to do that under the existing bylaw, but we had no legal powers against Uber itself, and that's why we had to do a new bylaw, because our old bylaw, the courts did not uphold them against Uber as a company. So it's one of the reasons why I argued strongly that we should get the new bylaw in place as soon as possible. And I know there were a lot of in the taxi industry that wanted that as well, because our ability to do enforcement until we get that new bylaw in place is really compromised. So it's actually going to start on March 1st.
Okay. A new bylaw, do you think it's perfect, or you think it's too weak as compared to taxi bylaws?
No, I don't think it's perfect. I don't think we're done with this yet. I think more work is going to have to happen. I would like to have seen a minimum fare piece in there. I'm really worried. I'm really worried that but we did put something in that says that they have to come back to us once we get a feel for how it's working, and I'm hoping we'll be able to reconsider the minimum fare and look at that later. I mean, we have a very weak minimum fare in there right now, and I don't think it's going to be sufficient. So no, I don't think there is a perfect answer to this. I don't think that if there was an easy answer to this, you would have seen people taking it. I mean, in the long run, I think what's really important is to make sure that the taxi business can continue to operate, because I would hate to see that gone. But clearly there was a whole populace who wanted something else, and I think we just needed to make sure that we gave us that we gave as many tools as possible for taxis to be able to continue to do what they do in a regulated market, and that we made enough difference between that and the kind of service you're going to get from an Uber, from a private server, that hopefully the two will be able to exist side by side. I mean, that's my hope. I don't know if we've got ourselves there yet. I don't know if this is the final answer. I suspect it isn't. But that's you know, our worry was that if we waited and didn't get in there fast enough, one, we couldn't do any kind of enforcement, and Uber had been operating here for close to a year, and there wasn't very much we could do to stop them. So this gives us some tools to at least make sure that they operate within the bounds of the law, and you know, and to make sure that everybody was safe, and getting the bylaw in place as quickly as we could, and then going back and seeing how it works and doing revisions afterwards. It also meant in us going first that we got to write our own bylaw in the way that we thought was best. Our concern was if another city went first, we might be bound by their choices, and this allowed us to work as much as we could with everybody to come up with the best possible scenario in a very difficult situation.
Okay. Did before or after bylaw, any other ride-sharing company came in picture in Edmonton?
Not to my knowledge, but I wouldn't want to say no. They certainly didn't come and meet with me. I think the assumption would be that, and our hope would be that Uber won't have a monopoly of this, that there will be competition. I think that would be in everybody's interest, because I think that'll keep people honest. But no, to date, to my knowledge, no one else has talked about that. But I couldn't say they haven't met with other people. They didn't meet with me.
Okay. One main reason, Ben, people like Uber is the reduced rates. If you look at Toronto Council passed after the Uber, they have reduced taxi rates. Did you guys think same thing in Edmonton to reduce the taxi rate so taxi can compete better to Uber?
Well, no. What we did was we said you can only get those reduced rates if you order the vehicle using an app. So what we said is a taxi, if it's ordered by using an app, can do exactly what Uber does. So the taxis will be able to compete by lowering their rates. What we said is if you're not using an application, then the regulated rate still applies. And my worry about lowering all the regulated rate is that it might actually make it even harder for the taxis. I mean, the trouble with any change you make in this is there's unintended consequences that you can't see. So what we said is there's two different kinds of ways this works. You have the traditional taxi system, which is operating as it always has, and that everybody is obligated to work under that system. You have to be a taxi. It has to be regulated. If you're going to do a street hail, if you're going to pick up a cab at a stand, or you're going to phone in and book it, none of that changes. The only time that you can do this other kind of system is if it's based on an application. And taxis have just as much right to take a ride that way and to negotiate their price if it's application based as these private operators do.
With this new bylaw, do Uber driver need class 4 license or any professional driving course or training?
Drivers. So the same expectations are there, both in terms of training, in terms of the correct license. We haven't compromised on that, and in terms of the insurance. So they will have to be properly insured. Now, if a new product comes on the market, if somebody's prepared to come up with insurance that they say that the province is prepared to say is sufficient and safe, and the insurance company is prepared to insure them, that's what we need to see. But we need to know that people are properly insured, and the current situation is not acceptable. At this point, we would not let anybody drive for Uber legally unless they had commercial insurance. If there's another product that comes on the market that's sufficient to make sure that the passenger is properly insured and a third party is properly insured, that would meet the test of our bylaw. So no, we haven't. But some of the things that we had expected of a taxi license before in the past, in terms of training, in terms of language, those things we're not asking of the taxis anymore either. So it's the that's the same rules for everybody.
Okay. Other one concern about Uber, they usually increase rates at the peak time, busy time. And when I was reading your bylaw, you guys ignored it. But if you compare, if you look at the taxi rates are under bylaw. It cannot go up or go down. Why did you guys not think of regulating Uber rates too?
It wouldn't have happened, and I'm not sure it would have been. I think actually one of the advantages that we need to leave an advantage still to the taxis, so they're going to still be able to. I know I would still take a taxi rather than Uber because I want the certainty of how much I'm going to pay. I don't want to play those other kind of games. I want to know what kind of vehicle I'm getting into. I want all those sort of things. That's in terms of competing with Uber what the taxis have in their favor, and if we'd undermine that. Then I think we would not have necessarily been helping the taxis. What we have said is, if a taxi chooses to take their ride, not as a street hail, not by phone, but by an application, then they can do the same surge pricing that Uber's doing. So they have the choice. A taxi has the choice of operating either way. If it chooses to be ordered by an application, then it can play by exactly the same rules as Uber. But the taxi can do something that Uber can't do, which is pick up a ride off the street, pick up a ride off a taxi stand, take a ride by a phone booking. But if they do that, then we're staying with the regulated rates we've always had, and that hasn't changed. We can still go back in and look at those rates. There's nothing to say that can't be looked at. Nobody was particularly asking us to do that at this particular time. And the other thing we may have to go back and look at is whether or not we have enough plates out there and whether or not we need to go back and look at the cap. But that's a different discussion, and I think we'll hopefully get onto those discussions next with the people in the taxi industry.
Okay. What's the taxi drivers reaction on this in Edmonton? Are they happy or are they satisfied?
There's a lot of them that are very, very worried, and I think, and I don't want to undermine that worry. I think what I would say is I think there's different parts and different kinds of drivers and different people in the industry that have different interests in this. It's a very complicated business. So my guess is anybody who owns their own taxi or some of the brokers are not happy with what's happened. Anybody renting a taxi from somebody else, I'm not sure where they're at. I think actually they may see this as an advantage because it means that they have some other options for how they can drive. So I think there's different people with different, the people that are unfortunately are going to, I think, but I think that's already happened, have been hurt the worst are the people that had bought their plates on the gray market at prices substantially higher than what we had originally sold them for. And obviously the value of those plates has changed significantly, and I think we all really feel for people that may have made investments at the top of the market in a plate they bought from someone else at a vastly inflated price. And that price, there's no question it has changed. Whether or not that will change and come back, I think has to do with how we deal with the cap. I think those are the people that are potentially the most hurt. But those prices had already changed. They've changed already in the last year. I feel really badly for anybody who bought a plate a year or a year and a half ago. And the thing that I really regret, and I'm not sure the reasons to do it to begin with, is that we ever made the plates transferable. Because in so doing, we created a situation where this gray market on plates could exist. Because we're not charging $100,000 for a plate. That was just what they became valued because we allowed people to transfer them and sell them to each other. And I think in retrospect that was a mistake.
Are you doing something to fix that?
So
are you doing something to fix that?
Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens on it. I think my feeling is if we decide to put more plates out there, my guess is we will make them non-transferable, which would mean that any existing plate will be grandfathered in, and that may raise their value again. So you'll end up with two different classes of plates. One that you can't sell, that you would have to give back to the city if you decide to stop driving, and one that you can sell and pass on, and that may help some of those values come back up again. I don't know. The market will do what the market does. I don't know, and as I say, it's a very, very complicated. The more we've worked on this, the more complex the business is. You think you're doing things for the right reason, and you don't understand that there's unintended consequences of everything. I think for us, our really greatest hope is that everybody can continue to thrive, that the people that have plates will continue to be able to make money back off those plates by driving cab, which is the real intention. And that ultimately that will settle down, and we're just going to have to really keep a really close eye on it. I mean, I have to say, my number one priority is making sure that and I think this is why you regulate businesses like this, is to make sure that the customer is well served. And I think we as the city, I think that's our number one concern. We have to make sure that the customer is safe, that they're well served, that the system is working. Those are our responsibilities, and we will have to keep a very close eye on this to see what happens next. And if it starts to go wrong, and if the customer is not getting the service they need, then we will have to step back in again and figure out how to fix it. I'm nervous about it. I think we regulate this business for a reason, and I wish we had never been faced with this problem. We could have worked within the regulated system, but that wasn't an option that was available to us anymore. So we needed to find a way to move forward, and this felt like a step in the right direction. I'm not convinced it's the final answer, but we're going to have to let the system work for a while and then respond and adjust to it as it happens. And hopefully, I think our hope is that all options can stay available, so everybody can get the service that they're looking for. So the people who still want a regulated system will always be able to get a cab, and those that want something else, that will be available for them too, and that both things can thrive side by side. That's what I'd like to see.
If you want to operate a taxi, you have to pay fees per year to city, for example, mechanical or maybe taxi badge or maybe taxi cab renewal. But in case of Uber, what I'm reading, Uber has to pay only one fee, 70,000, and can operate as many as cars. Am I right?
No, they're going to have to pay per. They opted to pay the fee per ride, so it will add up. I don't know if we have those numbers right. I don't know if those. I think we're going to have to go back and revisit that. I mean, ultimately, from the city's point of view, we don't want to make monies off our taxi licensing system, taxi regulation, but we expect to break even. We don't subsidize it either. I think we're going to have to make sure we come up with a system again that's fair, that makes sure that the right players are paying their right portion of our costs to run the system. And I don't know if we have that right yet, but no, there is a per car and per driver fee, but it's not a flat fee. It's based on the amount you drive and the number of trips you take, and Uber will figure that out in its deal with its drivers. But we are being paid for the drivers that drive. It's just we're doing that in a slightly different way. I'm not sure we have those numbers right yet. And again, I think we're going to have to make sure that we don't tip the balance in terms of fairness and competition, and that everybody is paying their fair share. So I think there's more work that still needs to be done on that. But it's the idea is to make Uber's paying basically a broker fee, but each driver is going to be paying a fee as well. It's just calculated in a different way.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for joining us. I hope you guys fix the bylaw so taxis and Uber can both operate under fair rules to both of them.
That is my hope. That's what I would like to see. And as I say, we had to do something. I'm not sure we have it right yet. But I think at this point we're going to have to let it run for a little while. We will be watching very carefully to see what actually happens. And I put a motion on the table that says they have to bring us back a report to give us some real numbers and some real data and some real figures once we have them, and then we can have a look at all this again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.